I mean,
We ready? Welcome everybody to our City Council meeting for Monday, April the 9th. If we could have a roll call to establish order, establish a quorum, please, ma'am.
Terry McClung.
I'm here.
Melissa Green.
here.
Bob Thomas.
Here.
Vicki Schneider.
Here.
Christy Kendrick.
Here.
David Mitchell.
Here.
We have 6.
All right. If we can stand and pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, get a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Got,
Yes, I've got, to me, it seems that it would make more sense to hear 3 and 5 and then 4 than 3, 4, and 5. So I recommend first that we reorder those items on the agenda.
I'll second that.
okay, so you want item 3 to be number 1?
No, just
Well,
put
just
what? How do you
that
want-
it
how
be
would
in
you
the order of 3, 5, then 4.
switch 4 and 5.
So it
Yeah.
would be like this.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
It'll be
I would
3,
like
5,
to
4.
add
1,
a
2, 3, 5,
discussion
4.
of the parks grants according to the newspaper being handed off to council.
Second.
And then finally, I would like to have a report on the status of Dr. Beard's tenancy.
Second.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Yes, sir.
I'd like to defer the resolution acknowledging Trails benefactor and endorsing the project until the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, so that takes care of that. Anything else?
That's what it was.
There being no other
Yeah.
no other changes in the agenda, all those I'd signify approval of the amended agenda, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any corrections, additions? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the minutes as submitted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Ms. Kendricks voted nay. All right, motion passes. We've got some vacancies in the Planning Commission, hospital, and cemetery. So if anybody out there and watching in TV land that live within the area, with the exception of the hospital you can live within the western district of the county and apply for the hospital commission. And I think it's cemetery the same thing?
Yes, it is.
I believe so, yeah. If you're interested in any of those, please come by and fill out an application. We got public comments. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes. And first one up.
I'm really just the messenger this time. When the public heard that you were going to do the resolution to say thank you for the downhill project and the support of the project, they wanted to sign on in some way to say thank you to the Waltons. And so they have been signing on. They have been saying thank you in every way possible. So my hope is we'll have this for the next 2 weeks, and then we're going to give it to Justin and Bill to give to the Waltons so that they understand that the community is grateful for the gift that they've been given. So here you go. And you guys can sign too. I guess I should show you this. I'll have it around town, and if your community or your organization wants it or your business wants it, you can just contact me, and I'm happy to come and bring it to you and let you sign it too. So thank you to the Waltons, and thank you guys too. We appreciate it, and we'll be giving this to you.
Hi, I'm Brian Watson. I live in Berryville, Carroll County, but I work in Eureka Springs. I've worked here for 18 years. When I first heard about the Trails project for Leatherwood, I thought it was fake news. I thought, oh, who's going to do that? But I'm so excited to have it, and I hope we will have it. I work in a gallery, 18 years in Quicksilver, and I've seen the ups and downs, and I believe that anything that we do to bring people into the area is a beneficial thing for the city, for the businesses, for all the workers, everybody that's involved. I don't believe that there could be any negatives in this. There may be a tree or two that has to come down, but I believe that bringing in people, they will live here, they will have hotels and food. I don't know how many of them are going to buy art, but I certainly hope they will come to the gallery and do that. But I just want everybody to know I am on board for this, and I hope that we all will be also. Thank you.
Thanks. My name is Ken Riley. I work at Century 21. I had my own business in Chicago for 25 years, and I knew a great part of keeping the lights on was who came through my door. I don't know what... First of all, I'm not a fan of Walmart. I had a guest that bought 6 crews, and I thought that meant 6 pairs, and it was 6 socks. But what... If we take a look at what the Waltons have done for Northwest Arkansas, it's kind of hard to say no to it. You know, it doesn't mean that I have to go there and shop, but it's real hard to say no to it. That's probably all I needed to say. We need more. We need income to produce to keep the lights on, and that's all.
Hi, my name is Jack Moyer, and I'm here representing the Eureka Springs Community Center Foundation. I'm actually the chairman of the Greenhouse Committee. I've shared with you a little bit of a timeline of that community greenhouse, but I wanted to enter that into the record so that you knew where we stood and how that project came to fruition. First of all, the owner of the community greenhouse is the Eureka Springs Community Center Foundation. The greenhouse was made possible by a grant applied for by the Community Center Foundation and received from AT&T. The grant for the greenhouse was to add a community center offering with an educational component consistent with its use. After we received the grant, we formed a greenhouse committee. I was the chair. Members of that committee are Diane Murphy, Gene Elderwin, and Bill Featherstone, representing the Community Center Foundation. Jason McAfee, Olivia Foster, John Toombs, and Justin Huss, representing growers and or educators. To date, the Eureka Springs Community Center Foundation has had 2 trainings, one for the community and one for professional growers, partnered with the Cooperative Extension Service or the University of Arkansas. The Community Center Foundation has ordered its greenhouse and received that greenhouse, and it was facilitated by committee members. The Community Center Foundation has gained approval to install the greenhouse from the HDC and the Planning Commission. At this point, the Community Center Foundation has issued bids to install the greenhouse, and we expect those bids to be returned by Thursday, April 12th at 5 p.m. The Greenhouse Committee has discussed a contract for management of the greenhouse and made a recommendation to our attorney to who should operate the Eureka Springs Community Center Foundation greenhouse. The contract is coming back from the attorney. We expect it. That contract draft was approved to be sent to the attorney by the Community Center Foundation, and we're awaiting final wording. Upon receipt of that contract, we plan on submitting that. The Eureka Springs Parks Commission was identified by the Eureka Springs Community Center Board as the most qualified operator to partner with on the project. And that was a motion approved through the Community Center Foundation. Pending contract coming back from our attorney, We hope to present that contract to the Eureka Springs Community, or the Eureka Springs Parks Commission, and it is the intention of the Community Center Foundation to have the Greenhouse Committee Chair, myself, present to the Parks Commission a proposed contract to operate the greenhouse at its next commission meeting. We enter this record into the record. Thank you.
Good evening, council members and mayor. My name is Judy Montgomery, and I have lived in Eureka Springs since July 4th, 1987. All but a few months of that within the city limits. I would like to say that I am in favor of the current trails projects, including the downhill at Lake Leatherwood. No, I won't be using it. I don't have the physical profile. But I believe in endorsing things that will bring visitors, the positive type of visitors, I believe, to our town for the benefit of all of us. And if you don't think that tourism doesn't affect you, you're wrong. If you live in the 72632 zip code, tourism impacts you. And I also would ask the council not only to leave the Parks Commission autonomous, but all the commissions. They were designed that way for a purpose. I don't think any of you has time to run those commissions. And I don't mean that in a snide way. I mean that in a serious way. And then also, if this is to the public listening here or at home, if you feel left out on information on anything happening in the city, go to commission meetings, come here, make calls to your alderman, find out what you want to know. And the last thing I will say is I would like to ask us all to please see the forest as well as the trees. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mary House, and I am a local here in Eureka, and I've worked here for a little over 6 years. I just wanted to say that I highly support the trails in general, as well as the downhill project that's going in. I think it is super awesome and wonderful, mainly because we're making history here. So it was a statement was said to me recently, which I thought was really amazing, that what is the biggest economic development project that Eureka Springs has been a part of, has the city of Eureka Springs been a part of, since 1906 when this building was built? The trails. So how cool is it that not only do I get to be a part of history, you guys get to be a part of history too. And I really hope that you guys can support that project.
I need a place to put my phone. Hi, I'm Pat Costner, and I'm happy to get to talk to you this evening. In looking through the contract that either the city or the Parks Department, Parks Commission has with Northwest Arkansas Trailblazers, I see that the Parks Commission says that it has a stormwater management policy or plan. In looking at the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality's website, specifically their public data system, I could find nothing in there that shows that the city, as the owner of the Lake Leatherwood City Park, has ever submitted application for a permit for stormwater management in relationship to the downhill project. So, unfortunately, I felt compelled to submit a complaint in that regard, since I've talked to Mr. Huss or communicated with him several times about various policies and practices to no particular solid outcome. So there is now a complaint, and what it means is that the city will need to respond and submit a SWEP, Stormwater Pollution Prevention plan, to ADEQ. So I wanted to say that from my personal perspective, the issue here from the beginning was lack of process. Jackie says that the community supports this. I say that the community was never given an opportunity to weigh in on this process. All we're doing now is a retrospective. So that is the problem, is that we have no actual real democratic process on this. And in a town, a community this small, to have such a thing happen seems just inexcusable, almost unbelievable to me. So this is perhaps to some people's minds an issue of the trails. It's a much bigger issue than that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Diane Murphy. I live in town and I have a business in town. I've been in the area since 1984. You know I've been here before. I feel so strongly about the value of the Downhill Trail project to our town. It is, in my opinion, the biggest single economic development project we've had in a really long time, and it's something that we've been looking for. It's what we've touted ourselves to be as a place of outdoor recreation. We have asked for the opportunity for new things to come into our town, and I'm feeling like the very first time that opportunity presents itself, we're resisting it. When you look at economic development, then you also look at all of the other things that it can do for our city. We all know our sidewalks are terrible. Our sewers need so much work. We would be working on those. I know they matter to the mayor. We would be working on them if we had the funding to do it. But the only way we get funding is for growth in our economy. I had a colleague that was in town this weekend, and she had a rather serious accident on our sidewalk up at Pendergrass Corner, where a metal plate slipped and her foot went in the hole. And she's lucky her leg didn't break. I feel bad when that happens to people. It is a rare thing that we get to hear about it personally. It's something we should all be concerned about. We have got to find a path towards making the infrastructure and the basic everyday things that are important in our town. We have to make them functional, and the only way to do it is through economic growth. I hope you will consider this a valid approach to that. I also want to say one more thing. It is really hard to be a leader in Eureka. There's a lot comes at you. So I want to thank you for being leaders, and I hope that you'll continue to step up to the plate. Thanks.
I'm Karen Kinsel. I have been here since May of 1978. I've owned a business here ever since then. I'm a broker at Century 21 Woodland. I'm here in support of change. The only thing constant is change, and Eureka needs to change with all the times and the things that are happening today. I have personally done the Razorback Greenway Trail from Bentonville to Fayetteville, and from Fayetteville back to Bentonville. It was an experience that I didn't think I could do, and I did it, and it's something that a person my age felt achieved by. I think the trail system, the downhill system, all the things that we're bringing in, the new ownerships of the motels that are now reaching out to the outdoor activity people in their 30s, young, energetic people. People are coming in with their money. We need to support this and be behind it 100%. And I hope that you'll agree. Thank you.
I'm Doug Stowe, and I've lived in Eureka Springs. I live outside of town, but I have lived in this area since 1975. And I'm a woodworker. I write about woodworking. I teach woodworking. I've written over about 100 articles for national publications. I teach woodworking at Clear Spring School. And one of the things that makes me interested in teaching woodworking at Clear Spring School is that my kids know what walnut looks like. They know what cherry looks like. They know the difference between white pine and yellow pine, and they know a lot about the environment. And one of the things about woodworking, it is an avenue through which a child can learn about nature. There's a thing called nature deficit disorder that is prominent in our country right now because kids are all looking on their iPhones. They're not engaged in reality. And so I'm really in favor of the trails, all the trails, because the trails engage people in observing reality, a natural reality. I think it's so important that we get kids into nature so that they have a sense of appreciation. One of the things that has troubled me ever since I moved here was watching forests be cut down to make parking lots and things like that. And we don't have any city planning in our county, and so it's very frustrating when we watch areas just be decimated and clear-cut for no reason. And so it's frustrating to watch a couple oak trees being cut to form the downhill trails. They made about 4 miles of them. They cut 2 oak trees. I watch more than that happen, and it distresses me. But one of the keys to restoring some kind of balance is to have people engaged in nature, understanding nature, and appreciating nature. So thank you very much for all that you guys do in service to our city. It is so important that we have good service and we have good leadership. And I am in support of the downhill trails. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Barbara Kellogg. I've lived in Eureka Springs 30 years. I have my home as well as a business here. I'm very concerned that the citizens of Eureka Springs were not more involved in the project of the downhill trails at Lake Leatherwood. I'm concerned that we did not have the input that we should have. I'm also concerned about the proposed trails in town, and I hope that we will have input in those. I've been told that I have misinformation about that project, and the reason I have misinformation, I'm assuming, is because there's no place to get really the whole picture, the total plan. I would really propose that you consider having some kind of a town hall meeting for the proposed in-town trails so that the citizens of Eureka Springs who will be affected by these trails that would possibly be right in their own backyards could have a say about this project. Thank you.
Good evening. Pat Matsoukas, 5 Mountain Street. I ran over here tonight, so I'm in the middle of tax season, so sorry I didn't get to get all spiffied up. Having said that, Let me start with the easy stuff. I do not understand why, if the police are driving around at night, they can't figure out which light poles don't have lights and call it into SWEPCO since they're around town at night. There's nothing worse than having a town that's half lit. Either light it up or call it a day. You know, it's really awful. I also think that as a community we need to start talking about plastic bags and getting rid of them and how we can deal with them in our economy, because the world is changing, as we know. With all these 30-somethings and their money and all their great stuff coming in, we want to get rid of plastic bags at some point, and we should be talking about these things. I'm looking at the parks thing, and several things happen that make me say, Parks needs a greenhouse. Parks is Parks. They have everything they need. If the parks needed a greenhouse or some sort of facsimile thereof, why wasn't a proposal put out to the general public so that all people could respond that wanted to? This is part of the challenge here, is the lack of inclusiveness of the entire community. These backdoor decisions that get made without being brought up to the forefront. You all have to be responsible to that. And I want to say one other thing about parks and all the other commissions. They must respond to the council and mayor. You are our elected representatives. For them to have autonomy means they should either be elected to their seat, or you guys have to approve their budgets and their process. You must represent us. The only way we can have a voice on the commissions is through you. And this is crazy to give them this autonomy. It sets bad precedent all the way around. Parks never had this. Parks used to come in every year with a budget. This is what we're planning to do, blah, blah, blah. City council said yay or nay. If they are so far down the road that they have so much money and so much power that they are willing to go on their own, then we as a council and a city have the right to demand that you take back the sales tax or put it up on the November ballot for us to re-vote on. If they are financially solvent, then they don't need our tax money any longer, and God bless them. The downhill trails, as I said it 20 times now, it's unfortunate that it happened the way it happened because it made a lot of us unhappy with each other, and we should be unhappy with parks for lack of process. And that, my friends, is what you guys have to do, is protect the process. Thank you.
I have received two emails from people who could not be here, and one of these read into the record. The first is from Julie Benton, number 2 Bat Street in Eureka Springs. Julie Shelton, sorry. And she said, to Eureka Springs City Council members and Mayor Berry, I'm writing to voice my support of the Downhill Trails project that's taking place in Lake Leatherwood in partnership with the Walton Family Foundation and Tom Walton. This is a world-class project that needs to be acknowledged and supported. I've been a resident of Eureka Springs for 37 years, lived in town for over 35, and had managed 3 successful businesses located in downtown. This project is a win-win for Eureka Springs and brings to town a demographic we have long been missing. I've been involved in the outdoor industry for well over 20 years now and been encouraged lately about the marketing of Eureka Springs. Now embracing what we have here in way of outdoor experiences that would help businesses grow in tourism. This project will bring families to Eureka Springs as well as the younger millennials who choose to spend their money on experiences. These visitors will spend money in restaurants, hotels, motels, retail shops, and art galleries. As a specialty retail manager in downtown Eureka, I know for a fact the shops are struggling. And I've seen the last few years more space vacant for longer periods of time than I ever have. There's a talk about among some in regards to the impact of the environment of that area of the park, although it's apparent when hiking the trails in that area that the power lines cut through that area and the herbicides being sprayed and oversprayed in that area year after year continues to cause an impact. When recently brought up in a meeting, that fact drew no reply from the environmentalist. There's also a glade restoration project in the works for Lake Leatherwood, which is also very exciting and something the Parks Department has wanted to explore for a while, as I understand. And this will improve and enhance the area of the park. The project gives me hope for Eureka Springs. It's a clean industry in a town where we need to grow toward the future and still preserve what is wonderful and authentic in Eureka Springs. I like my letter to be a public record. Thank you. Attention to this matter, Julie Shelton, 2 Bat Street, Eureka Springs. The next letter is from Gene Eldwin. It says, good afternoon. I am stuck in an airport, and I don't believe I'll be back in Eureka Springs today to be able to come before you in today's public comment. So if you don't mind, I would like to express my thoughts here. For 30 years, until I retired recently, I was your Eureka Springs Carnegie Public Library Director. As you can imagine, I hired dozens of employees over the years. Do you know my first words to them on the first day of staff orientation? We are in the hospitality business. Even though we're in a county-wide property tax-funded service, we know that our funding is tied directly to the economic prosperity of our county and Eureka Springs in particular. Over the decades, I established policies to serve our residents while opening the doors wide to visitors who need services we could provide, like computers, printer services, free paperbacks for those in need of reading material, temp library cards for longer-term visitors. We're happy to do this, but we look to you, the Parks Commission, the CAPC, the Chamber, and business owner to bring these great people to Eureka Springs. I want to thank you for seeing the downhill trails as a new exciting part of Eureka's future. Your endorsement of this project means a lot. The Parks Commission also has my thanks. I have friends my age, and I'm getting old, looking forward to these trails. I also have friends my age looking forward to having their visiting grandchildren use these trails. Life is a balancing act. You and the Parks Commission are balancing the good of bringing an exciting new way to enjoy the outdoors against a small but vocal pushback of individuals who do not want to change in this direction. When my contemporaries and I die, my daughter's generation will be in charge, and I want to give them the joy of Eureka Springs that we baby boomers received from our forefathers and mothers. We want them to have a thriving Eureka Springs economy with eco-based opportunities, and a city younger folks will not only want to visit but live in as well. And I'm confident that even after I'm gone, the Eureka Springs Carnegie Public Library will still open the doors wide to all the visitors you will bring us. So please keep them coming. Thank you for your vision and dedication. With respect, Gene Eldwin. So, all right. If there's nothing else in public comments, we will now go ahead with our agenda. If I can find it here. And our first item under new business is the ordinance for paying down the bond payments authorization schedule. Mr. Mitchell and Mr. Thomas.
Motion to discuss.
Second.
All right, did everybody get a copy of the ordinance?
Yes. Yep.
Any questions? Mr. Mitchell.
To get the ball rolling, I'll go ahead and like to make a motion to assign this ordinance a number and have its first reading.
Second.
Questions, comments?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Kennedy.
I have some questions about just the drafting of it. In the first line of Section 2, it says that funds from within the Water and Sewer Department, and then it goes on to say, from the current and future infrastructure and improvement, I&I fees. And then if you drop down to the third from the bottom line, it talks about operating funds from of the Water and Sewer Department. So I think maybe we're confusing I&I funds with operating funds, and I'm not sure that you would say that the I&I funds, if you say that they're from the Water and Sewer Department, does that mean that they're operating funds? I think that, to me, that's confusing. And then in Section 3, I don't know what the word equivalent means, what that's supposed to mean. So that's
Section
my
3?
Section 3.
There's no equivalent.
I don't see the word.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was an earlier, I guess that was in an earlier draft. That must have come out. I apologize. That word has come out. So forget that comment. I apologize.
Mr. Clark, somewhere, Lonnie, are you still here or are you gone? He's here. He's gone? No, you're hiding. Yeah. You want to address Ms. Kendrick's concern? I'm not sure.
Let's go over that again, if you would, please.
Ms. Kendrick, would you repeat your concern about
Yeah,
Section 2?
first of all, and this may be more with legal drafting, but it may also have to do with what funds, from what funds were these monies are coming from. Do you consider the I&I fees coming from within the water and sewer department?
Yes, they are, and they're restricted, if you will recall.
So are those operating funds?
I&I are not operating funds, no, and they can't be used for operations.
Okay. Okay, so it's clear to you that the I&I funds and the operating funds, they're both from within the water and sewer department, but they're separate funds.
That is correct. They're designated for separate purposes. When the I&I was established, it was specifically stated, if I recall, that those funds would be restricted and would not be used for operations. It would be used for infrastructure and improvements. And so and they're accounted for separately, as you can see in your budget reports, and they're not commingled in any way. There's a separate bank account for them, and so they're very distinct in their nature and what they're supposed to be used for.
Okay. Okay.
Very specific. And in this is to kind of assure everyone that there's not going to be an infringement on those.
Okay. So this paragraph is very clear to you as to what money is coming from where.
It is to me,
okay.
yes.
That's what my concern was.
It is to me.
Mr. Mitchell?
I'm glad to hear that again, because in Section 2, the sentence here, if, however, there is a shortfall in I&I collections, the Finance Department will reevaluate the amount to be applied to the bond retirement and will make appropriate recommendations for adjustment to Council for approval. That sentence means an awful lot to me, because I didn't want to see whatever happens at this table in the future with the elected officials, that somebody doesn't manage to get their fingers in the pie and start diverting I&I money again, especially when there is such a very assertive and beneficial acceleration water sewer bond payment schedule. Because this schedule that's on here that was asked to be attached to make this very clear to the public that this council is set back and very seriously taken into consideration the infrastructure and improvement of this community. But you know, if you have no money, you have no mission. And therefore, what this town has suffered from for a long time has been a lack of money to have the mission to really fix the infrastructure system like it should have been fixed. And now here is an opportunity established out in writing and being passed by hopefully the City Council to correct that deficit. And yeah, it may take a couple more years, but the benefit at the end of that is going to be phenomenal in the improvements that people will see probably starting in about 5 years, if not before. So I want to thank you for it.
Well, thank you for those comments, because we want to try to do this in such a manner as there's no, if there should be a shortfall, we want to bring it to you, right, to you, the council, for approval. But I think it's appropriate for the Finance Department to be the people that make the recommendation. And then I don't think it's up to us to make the decision. I think it's up to you all.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, and hearing none, we've got a motion to establish a number and read it for on its first reading. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
The ordinance number will be 2265. An ordinance clarifying the use of funds to retire the 2008 and 2010 water and sewer bonds earlier than their scheduled maturity dates. Whereas the City Council of the City of Eureka Springs, Arkansas, has made a review of the current repayment structure of the 2008 and 2010 series water and sewer bonds, as well as other money being received by the city in conjunction with the water and sewer operations. And whereas the council believes it to be in the best interest of the citizens of the city to retire the outstanding bonds early, now therefore be it ordained by the City Council of the City of Eureka Springs, Arkansas.
You said outstanding, it says outstating.
Should be standing.
Thank you. This actually is not the version that I did the spell check on. I'm glad you saw that one. Section 1, that the Finance Department is hereby directed to continue payments at this time on both the 2008 and 2010 series water and sewer bonds as set out in each respective bond document. That funds from within the Water and Sewer Department from the current and future infrastructure and improvement, I&I, fees shall be applied to increase the amounts paid on the 2008 series bonds in order that they may be retired by April 1, 2023. If, however, there is a shortfall in I&I collections, the Finance Department will reevaluate the amount to be applied to the bond retirement and will make appropriate recommendations for adjustment to Council for approval. Under no circumstances shall operating funds of the Water and Sewer Department be utilized for early bond retirements without the explicit recommendation of the Finance Department and approval by Council. See the attached amortization schedule. Section 3, that after the 2010 series bonds are retired in December 2020, the 2010 series bond payments shall continue to be made and applied to the 2008 bonds until they are retired. Section 4, repeal clause. All ordinances, resolutions, and parts thereof in conflict herewith are hereby repealed to the extent of such conflict.
I get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All right, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Mr. McClung?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to go ahead and suspend the rules and put ordinance number 2265 up for second reading by title only.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. I guess a parliamentary inquiry. I'm not sure why we need to do this. The first accelerated payment looks like it's in June 1st. Is that correct?
Actually, the first accelerated payment is...
or not even maybe till October.
October.
So I don't really see a need to handle this more than once tonight.
That's up to council.
Right.
I think it's a housekeeping matter primarily.
Further discussion? Okay, all those, we'll have roll call.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Ms. Schneider?
Yes.
Ms. Kendrick?
No.
Mr. McClung?
Yes.
Mr. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
No.
4-2.
Good boy. Good catch.
Ordinance number 2265, an ordinance clarifying the use of funds to retire the 2008 and 2010 water and sewer bonds earlier than their scheduled maturity dates.
Get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if it'll fit in here or not, but it's about this. When the second set of bonds gets paid off, what happens to the I&I? Does it automatically end? Do we have to end it? Do we keep it going? What happens?
I believe the intent was for it to continue to go forward, and then the monies would be used for actual replacement of the infrastructure that's very definitely needed within the city.
Okay.
I think that was the intent.
I couldn't remember if we'd even discussed it. Thank you.
All right. So, we got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Is that one? Ms. Kendricks voted no. Okay. Okay, that brings us to our next item of business is discussion of procedural concerns. Mr. Thomas and Ms. Schneider.
Motion to discuss.
Second.
Mr. Thomas?
Well, this is a housekeeping item, and I know people don't like housekeeping, but given the public comments, it's even more appropriate than I thought. My concern is that this council is flexing Robert's rules more and more frequently and flexing them further and further. Also, either from lack of knowledge or for reasons of expediency, Robert's rules has recently in several situations been simply overlooked or ignored. I've got to remove this earbud because I'm talking to myself. Sorry. Failure to appropriately enforce municipal code is one of the major complaints that council hears from the citizens of Eureka Springs. This council is a role model for commissions, for enforcement officers, and for citizens. Robert's Rules of Order is our code. We cannot honestly expect respect for the municipal code and enforcement of the municipal code out there if we do not model respect for and enforcement of our own code in here. I want to call your attention to a few examples, 3 general and 3 specific, of council's failure recently to follow its code. I'll start with an example that involved every person on council, myself included, and that's the one that's in your packet, and I have a few more copies if anybody out in the audience is interested. Basically, if you look at what we did on the 12th of March and how we did it, we ran through a whole bunch of amendments and motions and ended up with something that I don't even know what we did. And I'm not sure anybody else that reads it could decide what we did. So Roberts calls for motions to be made very deliberately, clearly, and succinctly in an orderly fashion, and they should be repeated exactly by the chairman before a vote is taken. So I think this is a perfect example of the fact that we need to clean up our motion-making process. Second one that I'd like to point out is that discussion should take place as per Robert's guidelines. No member speaks twice until all members have had a chance to speak. This particular guideline is violated often and repeatedly. We often see one or more members sitting with their hands up waiting to be recognized while another 2 members volley the discussion back and forth. That's very inappropriate. Number 3, the person who brings an item to the table speaks on it first. There is inconsistent enforcement of this rule, and the chair often speaks first on agenda items before he turns the discussion over to the person who brought the item to the table. Number 4, items should be appropriately added to the agenda. At a recent workshop, the scope of the workshop was arbitrarily expanded beyond the approved and published agenda by the chairman at the request of one council person. When concern was expressed about not adhering to the published agenda, there was a reference by the chairman to canceling the workshop unless such concerns were dropped. On another occasion, at a recent council meeting, an item that was not on the adopted agenda was introduced, a motion was made, and a vote was taken. To change the agenda during the meeting requires a 2/3 vote, which in our case is still 4 out of 6. However, there was no vote held to change the agenda at our last council meeting. And at our workshop, you can't change the agenda because you can't hold votes at a workshop. So there was a clear violation there. Another concern, during agenda setting time, proposed agenda items for the next meeting should be presented as statements and should be added without discussion when seconded. During a recent council meeting, a council person inappropriately and accidentally asked, "Could we have a discussion of police quarterly report?" instead of simply stating, "I want to add discussion of quarterly police reports." That question resulted in inappropriate dialogue which contained inaccurate information. The information could not be refuted because it was not the appropriate time for discussion. Several months ago, when agenda setting started to be a time for heated discussions, the chairman reminded members on several occasions that agenda setting was not the time for any discussion, and I'd like for us to hold to that. Finally, advocacy by the chairman for a motion to go to a vote based upon a popular expression of support is just totally inappropriate. When this council person requested to hear scheduled public comments on an issue before bringing a motion to vote, he was dismissed by the chairman with the statement, "I think from the applause that I heard, most of them support the amendment." This was a prejudicial and inappropriate statement by the chairperson, who is required by Robert's rules to, number one, make every effort to maintain an appearance of impartiality, and number two, not participate in debate on any issue unless he or she gives up the chair until the issue is disposed. So, I have a couple of recommendations. I have a short-term recommendation and a long-term recommendation. In the short term, I've just developed a little paper that explains point of order and parliamentary inquiry that I'm going to pass out to all council members so that you'll have it and you'll understand if you have a concern about something being done appropriately, how to stop it or how to ask questions about it. My long-term solution is that I move that a training session on Robert's Rules of Orders be held after the November elections, but before January 1, and that all elected officials presently serving and or taking office January 1, and all commissioners be invited to attend and participate. That's a motion.
Second. But I would clarify, make them come.
Pardon? Just a moment. Okay. The motion was made that, would you repeat your motion since it was rather lengthy?
I move that a training session on Robert's Rules of Order be held after the November elections, but before January 1, and that elected officials presently serving and or taking office January 1, and all commissioners be invited to attend and participate.
Does everybody understand the motion? Mm-hmm. Okay. Any further discussion? I'm not going to repeat your motion, even though you wanted me to. Yes, ma'am.
Can we make that mandatory rather than an
No, we're making what? The motion is that for all the new members to attend the workshop.
Present and new, to invite them. I think we should be present and new. Mandatory.
Repeat your motion.
It says,
may I see your motion, please, sir? That might be the best thing to do.
Because otherwise, nobody will come.
Right there.
Thank you. Okay, the motion says that a training session on Robert's Rules of Order will be held, and that elected officials presently serving or taking office and all commission be invited to attend. If you want to amend the motion, you may.
Okay, I would like to amend the motion to make it a requirement, a serving requirement.
All right, get a second.
See, none of you guys are going to come. I can tell already.
All right, hearing no second.
All right, I'll second.
You don't have to.
All right, comments on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion fails.
You're not going to come, I know it.
All right, we're back to the original motion.
You need to read it?
I think that's what you want me to do.
Yeah, that's what you're supposed to do, under Robert's rules.
So the motion is that the training session on Robert's Rules of Order be held after the November election, but before January 1, and the elected officials presently serving and/or taking office January 1, and all commissioners be invited to attend and participate.
The attorney has a...
Yes, sir.
Just to enlighten you, it has always been the council's purview to adopt its rules after it takes its seats.
Right.
You're going to have a meeting and outline rules that the new council may not adopt. So you may want to make that training session after the new rules are adopted.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The workshop, I think, would probably last no more than an hour. So if whatever council is sitting here January 1 votes to use some different code of conduct or code of rules, it wouldn't be a whole lot wasted.
Any further comments? Mr. Mitchell?
I understand totally what Mr. Thomas is trying to do. I see no problem with educating council members and people coming in. Robert's Rules of Order are difficult to understand, even if you get the Robert's Rules for Dummies sometimes. Also, in the bantering and discussion that takes place at the table, there's many times that we go off topic and just are not going to remember Robert's Rules. We've tried to have a little bit of leeway in that on occasion and allow for a variance or movement off of them. And we have an attorney that sits at the table that is supposed to be our guide in the rules of Roberts. And a lot of times we specifically ask him for something. I would hope that if he sees us with his experience going off track or sees a procedural problem, that he would actually take the initiative and express that to us while we're in the process of doing it. I think that would be a great way to learn also, and would supplement what Mr. Thomas is trying to say. So I would encourage our attorney to give us on-site guidance as we're going through the process also.
Any further comments? If not, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so moved.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I would like to make another motion related to the same topic. The holiday season is very busy for people, and it's also very busy for presenters. So I think we need to start setting this training session up as soon as possible. I would like to nominate myself to facilitate the training session and report back to council on any progress that I make.
I'll second that.
Discussion? May I see your motion, please?
Got here.
All right. The motion is that Mr. Thomas moves that the training session on Robert's Rules of Order be facilitated by Alderman Thomas and the date be selected and the trainer secured as soon as possible. Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Discussion down there.
David?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'd like to make an amendment to that motion that the city attorney facilitate that.
Do I have a second on that?
What do you mean by facilitate?
What the motion was made for Bob, the motion that he wanted to facilitate that, and I made an amendment that facilitation should rest with the attorney.
Yes, sir.
Is facilitating being in having it, or
Teaching.
he's not teaching it? That's not what he's referring to as
I'm not too sure what his definition of facilitate is. My definition of it was developing it, developing the process, developing the outline, developing the content, and it can well be also in teaching it. That was my version of facilitate.
Mr. Mayor, I think the motion...
And I think, Ms. Kendrick?
I just think that's kind of an expensive proposition. It's, I think, unnecessary, because we will have to pay attorney's fees for him to prepare for it and then to hold it.
Okay. Mr. Thomas?
I think the motion says set the date and find the presenter?
It said be facilitated by Mr. Thomas, and the date be selected and the trainer secured as soon as possible.
Sorry.
I'm not sure what the word facilitate means. I'm confused.
Facilitate means to set the date, to go out and find somebody who will teach this class, if you want to call it a class, to be sure we have a room set aside, to be sure that that everybody's notified of the workshop. That's called facilitating. Introducing the teacher when the workshop starts.
Will there be a cost involved?
I hope not. I hope I can find a volunteer presenter. If I can, I would come back to council and talk to them about a cost.
All right. Mr. Mitchell?
I'm sure that's Mr. Thomas's version of facilitate, but that's not my version.
Well,
Ms. Kendrick?
Okay.
There is an organization where and I just happened across it, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, but there is a non-profit organization that offers this training, and I will be happy to, once I go back and do a little bit of research, find that name and provide that to Mr. Thomas.
Okay. Mr. Thomas?
In that case, contacting this organization, arranging with them the date that works for everybody, I would consider that to be facilitation.
Mr. Mitchell?
I'm still disagreeing with Mr. Thomas with the definition, and I believe facilitate takes on a lot more. But besides that point, we also should consider that there is the municipal league that is available for such things as that.
Right.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, everybody understand the motion? All those in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
All right, 5-1.
Thank you.
All right, our next order of business is the number one, I think, detailed report of the Leatherwood Trails project from Ms. Kendrick and Mr. Thomas. Ms. Kendricks?
Yes. I'd just like to hear a report from the Parks Commission about the project.
Motion to discuss.
Yes.
Second.
All right.
For purposes of brevity, these are my comments from the last time I was here, because it was a report to that date. I just wanted to provide that so we didn't have to rehash everything in respectful time of the body. So I didn't pick up from our last meeting and talk about anything that's gone on since that time. Thank you. The major occurrence since the last time I was before council is that we've closed the entire area under construction at this point for several reasons. We have 2 bridges under construction right now. We're reworking the terminus of all the trails where they would come together and now travel under the road. So there's no good way or no safe way to be within there. We've also had a number of people riding on the trails with unauthorized permission, including an injury a couple weeks ago. So with all those things combined, this was time to close the area and keep everybody out of there for safety reasons. And we'll come back to visiting that site in a moment. Our downhill committee has continued evaluating routes as we're closing in on our last 3 routes to approve out there. We were working on one particular line where we had some geological concerns. Dr. Hellwig, who is on our downhill committee, clarified that a couple of these rock formations that our trail builders understandably wanted to jump off of, because that's what they do, that this was of significance and that we needed to reconsider that. So we started looking at some different routes, and ultimately we've decided to go ahead and leapfrog to the next line to give ourselves some more time to really rethink that line, because our trail designers literally did build the entire line to meet this rock formation. So if we're going to take that off, there's a couple several alternate routes we can look at. So that's being evaluated right now, and we've moved on to the next line, which is a lot more, has no geological features, and would actually be our bunny slope, our lowest level line on there. As I mentioned, our bridge is under construction. Mr. Stoke commented, I believe, earlier about we did have 2 oaks harvested from site off the Walton property for our bridge construction. Ideally, we would have preferred cedar if we could have found it, but we needed a 40-foot cedar that was 15 inches at the small end, and that's a really big cedar tree that we could not find. So the beams will be constructed out of oak, handrails, support. Everything else is built out of cedar from on site as well, in the tradition of WPA and how the entirety of the park was built originally. Traveled out there with Chief Samick from the fire department as we were continuing to evaluate our extraction techniques, zones, marking, how we're going to get out of, when people get hurt on this trail. Already have some really good ideas. We were able to tour around before it started raining too hard on us the other day. But we feel good about our plan and our general design. We'll have to find our exact areas with numbering system on each trail that people can report where they are, trail number, location. That'll go into a mapping. We can tell immediately, okay, that is in zone A, so the ambulance goes to 62 at the second pullout, and hasty team goes here, and we react to it on that way. So we'll be able to expedite our reaction to any injuries. And to that point, and with a big asterisk beforehand, I want to make a statement to everybody. And this is the same statement I could make with or without this downhill project. And that is that people will get hurt on these trails. And it's possible someone will die sometime on these trails. And like I said, that goes with downhill or the regular trails. When I was with Arkansas State Parks, we were trained as emergency responders, law enforcement officers, firemen, all these things to deal with these types of issues, because people do get hurt and die on trails. And that's not just mountain biking trails. There were several deaths last year at Devil's Den State Park from hikers. It's a nature of the business, and it's something that we're prepared for, and something we've been working towards since I've arrived here, is to get this response system in place, and this will branch out throughout the entire park, is the ultimate goal as we go forward, to have these zones, to know exactly, have a plan to respond to all of that. So again, we feel confident. We had a good meeting, good site visit out there, and Chief feels good that we can go through that. We also talked about the need for some additional trainings that we'll do in partnership with the fire department, some low-angle ropes training courses. Some of the best extraction points are to park on 62 and just come right down the hill, which we can do low-angle ropes and a controlled descent and get right down there to those folks. So we'll be working on that. And then we also were looking at our commission allocated money for emergency equipment purchases, which will be an insert for the back of our side-by-side that will carry a Stokes basket and backboard, where we can transport people out that way, and along with some accoutrements for the packaging and neck collars and all that type of stuff. And again, adding to staff, training staff, cooperating with the fire department, and again, we feel really good about what we have in the works there. We've had a lot of rain. You all might have noticed in the past month or so. While frustrating a little bit for some work, this has given us some really good stress tests on how the new trails are draining and designed and working, and it's pretty impressive. One of the stormwater came up earlier, and when we discussed this, how to word this in the arrangement earlier, the comment was made that by nature, trail design is stormwater friendly. The biggest concern when you build a trail is what the water does. So we're looking at, this is a 6% outgrade. This is to get the water to sheet in areas where it is a low spot, and we're coming in like at the bottom of a jump. Those out spots are armored with a drop so that it goes back to a wide sheeting motion of them, again, to actually slow down and then sheet off with the water. So those designs are working very well, and we can see that very clearly with all the rain we've had out there. So that is becoming very, very well done. One other thing that's happening. We just completed an application in conjunction with Fayetteville, Bentonville, Rogers, Bella Vista for combining all together as a region to apply as an IMBA, International Mountain Biking Association, gold level ride center. And this is a designation that places like Trestle Bike Park in Whistler, British Columbia have reached on this gold standard. What was decided was that as a region we could attain this gold level where individually the cities probably could not. So another step where we're being included in this fold in Northwest Arkansas in the marketing efforts that are going forward with Oz Trails and the trail development in general. So that's a big bonus for that. The other thing that's come out, I don't know if some of you may or may not have seen this, the Walton Family Foundation has done an economic impact report in Northwest Arkansas and determined that at the tune of $137 million impact in Northwest Arkansas in 2017. So this is the impact of the trails and biking just down the road. Some of this, we have hard data coming in across the country. This is just in the neighborhood and applies to ourselves. So to kind of try and correlate this locally a little bit, the best example we have is Lake Leatherwood. So we just have a little single sheet that shows, what do we go back to, 2013 to the present. Now this is for January through March. That's just January through March in each of these years. We put a little line graph in there, which is pretty self-explanatory on the impact these developments and embracing the trails and this regional growth is showing us directly here. And to that end, to go back to the closure, one of the things that's been requested, and I'm going to throw a couple dates out, is to invite council to visit the site. I think there's a benefit in everybody getting out and seeing this. Now, nature and length and how we want to do, we can discuss, but I mean, this would ideally involve a several-mile hike out to see these locations, so we do need to consider that. Going through my schedule and finding the most flexible times for myself, I have 3 dates in mind. I want to give council first opportunity, and we don't have to decide this right now, we could coordinate schedules, but to give council that chance, and then we're going to have 2 other chances where the general public can come out as well and tour the area and ask questions and have input as well in light of the area being closed, trying to give people still access and let them see what's going on out there. So to that end, proposal would be this Thursday, the 12th at 11 a.m., the following Monday, the 16th, 4 p.m. or later, and then Thursday, the 19th, which could be all day, anytime during the day. We wanted to give some options for morning and afternoon, depending on what would work better for council, and we'll do the same with the public, that we'll have some daytime and an afternoon.
What was the time on the first one, on the 12th?
The 12th would be 11 a.m. or later.
Thank you.
I may have forgotten the later, I'm sorry.
Justin?
Yes, sir.
How long are you anticipating this tour would last?
Well, I mean, if we do, let's say it's a 3.5 mile hike, I mean, that's generally speaking about an hour and a half, probably, depending on how much we chit-chat in between the spots, I mean, a straight hike of that very
look at who you're talking
to. I'm trying to say 5 that delicately, Bob. With a group with as varied skill levels as we may be looking at, I mean, we're trying to figure out a way we can get a group that's maybe not inclined to go the whole route, that we can hit some of the high spots easily and accessibly, and then everybody else can go on if there's not thing. I mean, that just the nature of it. We don't have a means to travel.
So would you say 2 to 3 hours at the most?
I would say, yeah. I think if we set aside 2.5 hours, I think that should get us through to be able to hit some of the high spots. Yes, ma'am.
And for those of us whose knees don't work, do you have wheelchairs?
We're working on really good things on these e-bikes now, maybe.
Seriously, is there any way?
If we do have that, I mean, we could get to some areas. We could take a few folks on the side-by-side up into an area or so. I mean, it just is by nature. nature. Again, this area of the park, I've spent a lot of my time on my butt sliding down the hill, if you'll forgive me, while I've been out here walking these lines. It's really hard to get around in this area if you're not on these trails, and again, these are steep and flowy, so I mean, my knee has hollered at me more than one day at the end of it, so.
Mine would last about 3 steps.
Right, so we can do, and if we find that, if we have a couple people, then perhaps we do an additional one we could find in that time. I'll certainly, any flexibility, any time I can facilitate that, certainly we can go out and go for a ride.
Thank you.
I like our new Ranger. So.
Okay.
I'll let Steve go ahead.
I have lots of questions.
I thought you might.
So if you will permit me, I'll just start them. And I think that I'm doing it in this context because I think it's very important that the rest of council hears the answers as well as the public. So if I may start, I think one thing that became very obvious to me when I looked at the environmental report is that part of these trails are on private property and part of them are on in the city park. And really, there's not a single trail that you would use just in the park. They're integral to each other. If you take a trail, you start in one property and end up in the other. Is that correct?
At this point, but as I've mentioned before, those property is to be donated to the city.
Well, that's my first question. Okay, okay. In the contract, it does talk about them donating or giving a permanent easement.
That was our minimum.
Or donation of properties. Has the location of these donations been determined?
Yes, aside from the cabin property at the top of the hill and 4 acres that's been taken out, the entirety of all the property that's been purchased is intended to be donated to the city.
Okay, has it been surveyed? Is there a plat of this?
It was sold by plat, and they're surveying out the property that will be separate from the donation.
I would be extremely interested in knowing what property that is. Is that going to include the parking lot?
Yes.
Okay, and what about the area, the helipad?
No.
Not the helipad?
No, that will be privately owned. We'll have access for emergency purposes.
Okay, will we have an easement for that purpose?
No, we'll have an agreement to access that for emergency purposes. That will be on private property.
Well, generally, agreements for use of property are easements unless they can be withdrawn.
I'm confident that our city attorney and I can figure that out when we get to
have we gotten to that? I mean, have any of these I mean, you're already talking about entering into these regional agreements and things, and yet to me, we haven't addressed the legalities of this project yet.
Which legalities are you discussing? Which, aside from
this
one's a property transfer.
What property is being given to the city, and under what conditions? And I'm just confused because.
Okay. I feel like we've covered this before, but we'll talk about it again.
When did we cover this before?
We've talked about the 3 pieces of property at the top that were taken off 5 properties.
When did we discuss this before?
I believe I discussed it in the packet I gave you, and previously when we discussed this as well.
I don't recall this ever.
Perhaps we've not. There were 4 parcels purchased at the top of the hill. The agreement that we prefer was at minimum a recreational easement, which would mean any trails, access, any of that is what's defined in the contract. Now, the intent is that will be donated to the city. With the only rider on that they would have was that those trails would be open and access to the thing. That would be the only condition attached to that property.
Okay.
So, admittedly, the dynamic that perhaps this body would not accept that donation is not something I consider, and I admit that, because I really can't see a scenario why we would not. So and again, Parks Commission has no illusions that we have that ability to do without the city council.
I'm not suggesting that we don't. I just don't know what the terms are.
Sure.
So that's what I'm trying to. It seems to me
it would
that
be for access.
very wishy-washy at this point.
Everybody has their opinion.
I'd like to see a plat. I mean, how can I not think that it's not wishy-washy since I haven't been given any terms?
Have you called me and asked for any of those terms?
I'm doing this in public so that public can hear it.
Well, I know it's just, you understand my frustration to be told you haven't been told this when you won't communicate with me to ask for this, and you want to do it.
Because I want the city to know about it.
Could you not as easily have said we had a conversation about this and we found this information?
Let's try to keep it.
This is part of the communication's a two-way street. It would be my comment for that.
I think correct me if I'm mistaken, Ms. Kendrick, what you're wanting to see is a plat of what's been given and some sort of, my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the only restriction is that it's going to be maintained for the public.
Yeah, and I'd like to have a clear idea. Are they going to retain some of that for like concessions, or are we going to operate? As I understand, and maybe you can. Sure. And this is a real question that I've got. I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
Are these on the whole? And first of all, tell me what a gravity trail is, please.
That is a downhill trail that is focused on downhill and gravity.
Okay. Are these primarily gravity trails?
They're exclusively gravity trails.
Okay.
Except for a multi-use loop.
So is it correct for me to assume that when people get down to the bottom, they're not going to want to go back up on their own steam, that they're going to want to take a shuttle back up?
That is the intention.
Correct?
And the dynamic, yes.
So are we going to be operating those shuttles?
We're looking into concessionaire agreements and what that is and what to put out. We're looking at possibly a request for proposal or a request for bids on our own dynamic of that. So we're exploring how those work, cost structures, all of that thing. Generally speaking, my opinion has been since the beginning as a former employee in the transportation industry, I'd just as soon not manage drivers, if possible. If we can do a concessionaire and take 20% and be done with it, that's the model that I prefer. Now that will require certainly, again, something from this table to determine an ordinance for doing business in Leatherwood, and we don't want just everyone running the shuttle, and we want to get revenue off of that. So that's something that we're fast approaching, and hope to come with something in the next meeting or two to council to work on.
Okay, and it would be a natural to have shops and like restaurants up at the top of the hill. Is that in the works, or? No,
that hasn't been discussed at all. I mean,
is there room for that?
You probably get a lot of different answers from different people on that. I don't see that as a dynamic. The only facilities I really see that are needed up there would be restrooms and potentially another concessionaire agreement where we might have rentals if we see the use that could do that. We could rent, concessionaire agreement with a bike shop, local or otherwise, and potentially some campsites. We've been looking for places to do some RV sites, and there's not really good spots down below with sewer concerns and things of that nature, so that might lend itself to a minimal development up on that tops area.
Okay, on the one piece of paper that you have given us, which is the map of the trails, there are two, I think you called them hubs. Mm-hmm. What are those?
Hubs are the areas these will start from. These are one hub will have 3 trails that originate from it. One will have 4 trails that come from that. And I actually didn't bring a picture of those. I apologize. I can send those along. We have some renderings of them. And these are stone-built, earthen, to give you the height to start down on each trails as you go forward. So there, you see the gravity dynamic again. You don't want to start on flat land. You want a little speed to start it.
Okay.
And I think, Mr. Thomas, you may be the expert on Robert's rules. We have somebody else wanting to ask a question.
Well, she hasn't finished yet.
But she's been asking a lot of questions.
I have, I'd like them all answered.
Sure. I'd like to answer.
We can either, each of us ask our questions in turn, or we can take turns. I don't care.
I'll wait until she finishes. I have no
problem. All right. Would everybody like to wait until she finishes?
Just one quick comment.
All right.
In the future, talk to them before the meeting so you have it in front of you like I did.
I think this is important.
Wait,
Then you can
Now-
bring it
all right,
up
now wait a
without
minute.
spending everybody's
Okay.
time.
You made your comment. You want to continue, please,
Yes,
ma'am?
I do. Okay. Will hikers be able to use these trails?
Not the downhill trails, no.
Okay. Will hikers be able to use any trails in that area, or is
Yes.
the fact that, I mean, will they be able to cross these, or are they going to get hit by the bikes coming down?
Again, part of this design process was maintaining Miners Rock Trail as
Okay.
much extent as possible. There's a lot of things going out. People, oh, go see miners before you can. That's completely inaccurate. They're saving the entire southern side of that. We're losing 0.94 miles of Miners Rock, which will become emergency and maintenance access. It will not go away. We'll still be able to access that for the bluff lines that go through there for interpretive programs. So we're utilizing that. And then additionally to the section of Miners Rock we've saved, if you kind of look from the Miners parking lot area, Miners Rock goes up this way. Now we have an extension that makes a full loop over there that will also serve as a return line. Not everybody wants a ride. Some of them, they do the enduro stuff and they ride to the top. So that return trail will go up that way. We're currently looking on the committee that perhaps that trail is one way for bikes going up. Because that will be multi-use trail, still hikers going through Miners Rock. The bridge we were talking about, that bridge is being built to reroute the trail under the bridge, so there is no ground level interfaces. That's been our biggest goal and the biggest dynamic with Miners Rock to consider, is to make sure we don't have that, which we do now and have for many years, just trails at ground level intersecting with the downhill or gravity trail as well. So we have two spots on Miners Rock, the existing rock drop off that's going to be extended with a CCC style archway. The trail will go through that and again eliminate that, and then everything else with the reroute eliminates all of those crossings, because that was the biggest challenge with Miners Rock as we came through, was having potentially like 13 ground crossings of the trails, and that's when we decided that center section needed to be just removed. That's just prohibitively, costly to build flyovers or bridges, because that was a main component throughout this design, was to have zero ground level intersections, because it's just not just a bad idea. So that's a big change we've done. So
that's good to hear. Okay. Are there going to be any dedicated hiking trails in the park, or will they all be both hiking and biking, or?
Multi-use is generally, and you'll get, again, this is a question you can ask different park managers, different land managers, different trail developers, and get different answers. Generally speaking, my opinion is that the multi-use trails are the ideal complementary trail, because they serve everybody, they provide the accesses. A counterintuitive thing, some of the, we think about some of their, like the restoration area is a good example of, oh, well, maybe we should put hiking only trails into there, no bikes, nobody running through. In actuality, hiking trails potentially do more damage to areas like that, because people are milling about and they're going slow and they're getting off the trail and they're walking. So there's some concerns of that. One thing we are looking at is running alternative lines next to trails, especially like Beecham and trails like that are highly traveled, to put a secondary mountain bike optimized line above that, get those bikers off the main path and come through. We're looking at some suggestions regarding maybe Fuller and Fisherman's Trail, that we could do a hiking only. There's a lot to be considered in that. It's not just an easy, well, we have biking trails here, we should have just hiking only trails here. You're still eliminating a group, and you're still not giving access to somewhere. So my opinion is that the multi-use with the alternate line is the best solution for that, really, versus some of the hiking only. Now, there may be areas where hiking only is appropriate, or an area we deem that, and we're looking into all those options as a balance too, because there is a large group that has voiced a strong opinion about that they would like some hiking only trails, and again, that's a balance and location and use, and again, management, enforcement, all those things, fun things we get into.
So in your opinion, do you believe that this is going to adversely diminish the hiking opportunities in Lake Leatherwood?
Actually, I think this will actually benefit that's the kind of the vein we were just talking about of the hiker only and the interaction of that. If you want to be on a bike and you want to go fast, we have 7 lines in this area of the park over here. We also have 20-plus miles of other trails in other areas of the park that are not going to provide that adrenaline boost or thrill dynamic that these do. So actually, I really firmly believe this will actually improve the experience in other areas of the park, because the people that are wanting to bike in other areas of the park are wanting to go to the backside of Beecham or the Rock Gardens where it's rooty and rocky and they're challenging themselves and they're the cross-country dynamic. And then again, increasing this with signs. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. There's universal yield signs, downhill yields to uphill bicycles, all bicycles yield to hikers. So some good informational signs at trailheads and on the trail, and and an opportunity to be fun in Eureka and on when you get down into these areas. Hey, ride mellow over in a group spot, share the trail kind of thing. So I think that's really how we address that, and we'll continue considering it as we go on. But it is a kind of a counterintuitive thing sometimes that the impact, especially environmentally, can be much higher from hikers than bikers. So it's an interesting.
Okay. Let's see. How will you pay for the cost of maintaining these trails after they're in, and and the amenities that are related to the trails, such as restrooms, etc.? Is that going to be do you think you're going to be able to recoup that somehow from the use of the trails?
Oh yeah, I think if you look at the sheet we just sent out to you, first off, we've already budgeted for a new trail maintenance position. Looking for some subsidies further on that. We also have doing some shifting around in our positions where we'll have additional staff dedicated more to trails. That'll be part of their duties each week. And we expect to see, even without this trail, we're expecting to see dramatic increases this year in revenue. We're already at 250% of last year, so we really feel confident we have, in addition to those already budgeting within this year's budget for these positions to deal with additional trail maintenance existing and with this new project, we're really expecting to do a mid-year budget review as well and have additional monies.
Where's the income going to come from? I see that there's a potential there from the franchise fees for shuttles, for example, but are you going to charge a fee to use these trails?
No, it's ancillary fees of increased camping, increased vending, increased concessions, T-shirts. All that goes up with this.
Okay.
And some direct revenue as well. And when we did the budget this year, we created the budget not counting on any revenue from this. I think we put in $5,000 maybe of shuttle revenue as what we thought we might make, and we budgeted off what we expect to see from what we're doing as if this project didn't happen. And again, we're already at, like I said, this year, we're seeing those increases to that focus already.
Okay.
So we feel very confident.
And let's see. Are you going to, that ecological assessment that was passed out to us did state that it was a preliminary assessment and that it needed to be reevaluated, I guess, throughout the year. Are you going to get another ecological assessment that will take into account the other parts of the year and see what other vegetation?
Oh, sure. We have Mr. Witz will be coming back out this month. Okay. Probably again at the end of summer, probably again in the fall. And ongoing over several years, actually, with our restoration project and coming back. This is one of those points where everybody talks about this, and we should do this, and we should do that. Well, it's about $3,500 every time he shows up. So, and that hasn't been a possibility in years past for this to go forward. So, we have again, we feel we have good information. We feel like we've made good compromises. There's the areas we need to stay out of, we stay out of. Some of the areas have been brought up are Dolomite Forest. That's a forest. It's not the ground level that's going to affect that. We've managed each line. We have this overarching view of the area from Mr. Witzel on the likelihood of the areas where things would be going in that area with the existing data we have, and we feel like we've made good decisions with that, and we're going to continue this throughout the park. This is not going to be just in this area. We want to do the entire park, and have been planning that since before this project. And that's the ultimate goal, is a full, detailed resource inventory of archaeological, cultural, and natural resources in the park. And that's part of our ultimate goal, to create a document utilizing ArcGIS to input this in for emergency response, for dam evacuation plans, for water lines, for electric, all this data with our trail assessment, our lake studies, all this stuff combined is driving us towards our, better and more informed management practices.
And you feel that the additional income that you're going to get from this project will be sufficient to pay for any ecological protective measures that you need to take, or any remediation that needs to be done?
Sure. Yeah, I feel confident between our tax revenues, our revenue at Leatherwood, and general revenue that we can handle all of these things we need.
Are we, and I bet you don't know, haven't probably even considered this, but are we going to redraw our city boundaries to include this property that is being donated to us? And the reason I ask this is because if there is concession stands or whatever that does go in on that property, we will certainly want to collect city taxes on that. And so I think that's a very important consideration.
Point of order. Justin really wouldn't know the answer to redrawing the boundaries. Wouldn't that be to our legal counsel?
Well, perhaps so. I'm just bringing this, perhaps it is a clarity.
The main concern for us, obviously, is that this not only annex but also be included to the boundaries, because we can't use any Leatherwood tax money dedicated for programming or anything unless that is at least the city park or annexed in the city. So that is a vital step that will have to come.
Thank you.
What is your point of order?
My point of order is that Mr. Huss was invited here to give a detailed report on the Leatherwood Trails project, and I think it's inappropriate for him to be grilled and incessantly.
Well, we're trying to get a report to satisfy the council, and Councilwoman Kendrick. I understand your point of order.
Okay.
And I don't want to be. It sounds like it's an inquisition almost. But I think what we're trying to do is get this information out. Obviously, some people weren't aware of some of the things. So, Ms. Kendricks, are you about through with you?
Yes, and just in wrapping up, I'd like to say I think the information that I've just requested is important that the whole city know, and this is why I asked it in a council meeting. I mean, I've had several people that have called me, had no idea that part of this property was not owned by the city. And I'm greatly relieved to hear that it sounds like the majority of it is going to be dedicated to the city and not being held in private hands, which I didn't know.
Right.
And I also...
Walmart or a
I also was not aware, I mean, at least in my mind, I kind of thought of that the use of that side of the mountain for this purpose would be mutually exclusive from hiking. You're telling me that that's not the case. I'm relieved to
Right.
hear that.
Yeah.
So I'm happy that this information is out there because I had very, very little information on this before I asked you these questions, and I appreciate your answering them.
Right.
And I hope that it's been helpful for the council and for the rest of the city.
I would interject that they've held several public meetings, public comments at the Parks Commission over these items, and the public, and it's been in the papers numerous times. But Mr. Mitchell, you had a question?
I appreciate Ms. Kendrick's intent with asking those questions because they did get a lot of information out.
Sure.
Got a little long, but you got the information out there. And you got it before us. This didn't probably start off on the best foot when it got going. But there is a line between when you're entering negotiations with powerful people like the Waltons that have a tremendous amount of money and are going to give a potentially beneficial gift to somebody. There's a certain amount of disclosure that is retained and not distributed necessarily as much as some people would like. And so it makes sense that this would start out with more of a privacy matter and looking into it, and then as it developed, the information would be shared and flowed when it was appropriate. At the same time, it was unfortunate that this happened to come up and coincide with some concerns about Parks relationships with the Community Center Foundation and some stuff there, which kind of started to intercede and entwine into this, and I think that a lot of this is the result of that. I still will go back to the theory that I think things are going to be a lot better now. We've had prior discussions here of concerns about where the boundaries of Parks' relationship and authority rests. And I personally don't want to get into the authority or the scope that the Parks Commission has to facilitate the parks at all. But, you know, we did have concern about the agreement you did that said the city of Elk City versus with the Parks Trail things and whether that was an agreement or not. So there was a few things here and there that were questionable. I think some of that came about, though, because of that time the person that was leading this charge and everything was going off in a direction that was a little out of bounds and created some of this concern. And I think we've expressed already up to this point issues about chairmanship and rotating, and we've had some other suggestions along the way. And we probably will have some more under the issue of the greenhouse, no doubt, so hang on. But I do want to thank you and the Parks Commission very much for all that you have done, the foresight, the planning, the development. It's a boon for the city. Nobody in this town should think that myself, or more than likely, I'm not going to speak for everybody here, but I'm pretty sure I could, that everybody is very, very supportive of this project, very supportive of the Walton Foundation. And the only reason the resolution isn't on here tonight is there's a little bit more work to need to be done to make that the best resolution possible for the support of the trails and the benefit and the benefactor of the Walton Foundation in this process. Sorry you have to clean up the process that you have, but you're doing a great job doing it. So.
Ms. Schneider?
Okay, a few comments, a few clarifications. Please clarify what I had asked you about before about the leatherwood trees, the little ones versus the full-grown.
You have to refresh me a little, Mickey. I've talked to a couple people since
It's
Friday
been a couple weeks,
talked.
Okay. There had been some young leatherwood trees that as part of the trails being built, several of them got removed, damaged, whatever.
There were 3.
Okay.
Yes, there were 3. And we know this is an area that there are some, but we also have several areas with very healthy and vibrant populations of that, and that's going to be part of, again, the resource inventory and restoration projects is where we can propagate If you go up Beecham Trail and head up to the overlook, if you look on both sides of you on just that little flat, you don't have to go up to the overlook. On both sides of the trail, there are probably 70, 80 of the Leatherwood. That's where we took Aaron Rogers, the rock solid trail manager, with Stephen Foster and I went out to identify those in various sizes so they could identify that.
So there is a whole section of the Leatherwood trees.
Multiple sections of it,
okay.
yes.
Thank you on that.
Recipients. I'd just like to say that for Stephen Foster's benefit.
Yeah, Leatherwood will do fine. and just so people understand, these are trees that literally grow in Carroll County only, out of the whole world, is my understanding.
See, I said I knew the word, but I hesitate to make that statement.
That was my clarification. My research showed that.
And there is an isolated. I'm trying to remember the fancy word Stephen uses.
I don't want to find out there's one tree in China.
There are. It is a unique woody plant. Actually, it's a woody plant in the area, but it is by no means endangered, to our opinion. No, we have a healthy population and potential to broaden that as well in some of these restoration projects.
Okay.
That will go along with the Glade project.
Then this will go back a couple of weeks, and that special meeting, that public meeting that was held a couple of weeks ago was that 4 of us went to was awesome. It had really, really good information.
What I heard about it.
Yeah, you were really good on the phone.
You like that? Quiet as I've been in a while, huh?
Okay, would you also clarify the legal ramifications of anyone using the trail, legal in regards to us? If somebody goes out there to ride their bike, and I don't care if it's a steep one or a regular one, if they get injured, are we, meaning anybody here in Eureka, responsible?
No. No, ma'am. I can actually...
This has been properly dealt with now.
There is some packets on the Arkansas recreational use statute. This has the actual statute and amendment to it.
Let me interrupt you. Point of order, real quick. Wouldn't that be a question you would have asked the city attorney? And
we did. We talked about it a month ago. I said clarification.
Why would we asking Justin that when we have the attorney sitting there and you just asked for a legal opinion?
The attorney gave us the legal explanation a month ago. I'm asking for clarification.
Well, wouldn't that clarification go to the city attorney? It's a legal question.
Do you see who had the paperwork?
All right, let's come on.
Jeez, she can go on for an hour.
Let's try to continue.
Uninformed, untrained, perhaps. This is a secondary level. This would be beyond tort immunity for the city. There's tort immunity, which is pretty solid. There are some, chinks here and there. Arkansas recreational use statute is another layer on top of that for private, public, local, state, federal.
Okay.
Tested in court.
Then my final one. Pat brought up this 5-mile thing with ADEC.
Mm-hmm.
Any comment?
I don't believe that's accurate. I don't believe this project fits into that criteria.
Talk to her and us, because this is the first I've heard.
We feel we're adhering to all required standards. This is not next to a watershed lake. We don't believe this meets a 500-yard standard. That's not something I'm familiar with.
Okay. So when you find out more later, you will clarify?
We'll let the council know if there's any issues coming up to that. Yeah. Anyone else?
Okay. Thank you.
Are we done with this item? All right. All right, then I'll go on to our next item, which is need a motion to discuss the plan for the Parks Greenhouse.
Motion to discuss.
Second.
Okay, Mr. Thomas.
Good evening.
Good evening. See you again.
How you doing?
Fine.
Okay. I went out and spoke with the teacher at the school who runs the greenhouse out there. I was not aware before I went out there that he is on the Community Center Advisory Board.
Yes.
So he was a little nervous about why I was out there. We worked it out so that I just asked factual questions. He didn't give me any opinions. He didn't give me any feelings. I don't understand why, when the citizens here have been crying for years about parks to do more for the youth, why are you not working with this school greenhouse? He teaches horticulture classes. He's in the process of setting up a year-long horticulture class, which will earn not only high school credits, but college credits. Those students are going to have practical experience with an employer. They won't be paid, but it has to be with an employer, not the school district. I just don't understand why. Again, it looks to me that you guys wanted a greenhouse and you only went one place to get it.
I'd have to back up and say that's kind of an accurate sequence of events there. Jack spoke earlier about this coming through. This was an AT&T grant they received that I'm uncomfortable speaking to their processes over there, but the way this was explained to me is this was a grant. They had this grant that had educational components. As they went down their master site plan, item 17 or whatever was a greenhouse, and that matches up with this grant. So that's how they decided to, well, we can move forward to this greenhouse, educational components, as he mentioned. Again, won't go into that. Then it was brought to us that, hey, is there a potential partnership here that would make sense? As I mentioned previously, we had $7,500 in the budget last year to build a greenhouse, much smaller greenhouse than what they put up there. And this made a lot of sense, and programming is a big reason why. Not only does the grant require educational components and ongoing educational components, we see that as a potential not only to help us financially with the plant starts and that, but to also provide an opportunity for programming. So the greenhouse kind of happened over there, and then we brought on board, so we had a greenhouse desire and we kind of came together. So it wasn't really, hey, we want a greenhouse, build us a greenhouse. It was more, we're building a greenhouse, do y'all want to be part of this? Now, when first discussions came in, just to kind of touch on some other things we discussed, when Diane Murphy and Gardner Tom Beckendorf and I at the time went to meet them the first time, we were discussing rent and all this stuff, and we all kind of left, well, frustrated about the process. Then we've come back again now to look at how we can operate that, and that's the discussion that's kind of gone on. Am I keeping everybody on here? All right. So to that end, I can tell you what we're thinking about, and that may answer some of the questions if that's okay. Just the discussions we've had about how we would manage this, how this arrangement would work. So the discussion we're having now is that in order for exclusive use or parks use of 50% of the greenhouse, that we will do the on-site management and day-to-day operations. So we've talked about before, this is not a staff member at the greenhouse. This is multiple staff people coming in, you know, for the plant management, for water, all that good stuff. So offers us some cost savings, allows us to hold plants through the winter that we can pull out of the spring, so it has that on the basic cost of that as well. The other half of the greenhouse, the agreement will be that we coordinate with the soon-to-be hired programs director up at the community center and parks to work on using that other half for community benefit. Now, we are shaping that, what that means right now. Spoke with Chris Fisher of Native Plant Society several times. That one's a real natural partnership for us. We think we could provide plant giveaways, plant sales, help with gardens, people's property, green spaces in town with plants that will attract pollinators, that type of activity. Also as an educational component for propagation for native plants as ornamentals, display area of that. One of the continued support from AT&T is to reach out, and we're already coordinating, again with the caveat that we're seeking approval here, with the East Lab students at the high school. And they've provided, I believe, 6 tablets that the students will be able to use. This could be used for irrigation monitoring, moisture monitoring, temperatures, all that, where they would be able to come to site. Excuse me, when you hit right on the head, some of those students need off-campus projects, internships, things of that nature. This would meet that for some of those students. Also dealing with Matthew Ekman with some of the special needs students where they have some off-site stuff where they can do. Where it's situated now, since we suggested moving it, is close to the meeting room at the community center. It lends itself very well logistically for programs, hand-on, back and forth for all that. We've talked about being able, once we get these display areas up, to open it up for tours during farmers market hours to come in here, here's some native plant stuff or projects. And the grounds around it just really lend itself to an in-town location for programming. So.
Except for the farmer's market. Everything that you just talked about could be done at the school. I don't understand why. And also, Justin, let me ask you just a question. Given all that's gone on with the city council and parks and Dairy Hill Trawler money and an ordinance to keep people from using grant money in other places, a motion that says no contact with the community center. At what point do you say, it's not appropriate for me to be on the foundation greenhouse board and write a contract so that the Parks Department will contribute to the greenhouse?
Me personally, or are we talking about somebody else?
I'm asking you that.
Okay.
I'm asking you that.
Well, one, it's a greenhouse committee,
right?
Which is, I would say, to the benefit already. We've moved the site and got a better plan through that. Everything you just mentioned, Bob, is there's some opinion involved in every issue you just raised.
I have never ever encountered.
I think I guess my response would be this, Bob. If we stepped back from everything you just mentioned and looked at the greenhouse and the potential between parks and the programming and the school partnerships, which we're disconnecting a little on, we're working on that. I don't see the issue. It makes perfect sense to me. It's a perfect agreement to me in my mind. Now, everything else to put onto this, sure. Now, we're not going to be able to use 800 feet of the school greenhouse for our own plant starts.
So you've discussed it with them?
Yeah, he's on the committee. We've talked, and one of the things we're talking about
on your committee
is to remain complementary to those two uses. It gives us more benefit again. So if you take away the whatever of all this. This greenhouse project is solid and right within our wheelhouse and right within our mission and a benefit to the community. And I feel strongly about that, and that's why I've continued on despite these other concerns, because they are concerns.
Okay.
So.
Mr. Mitchell?
I totally understand where Bob's coming from. And here's the crux of the problem. Is not the community center a 501c3? Mm-hmm. Is not Parks a department of the city? Mm-hmm. The city is a municipality that gets its money from sales taxes and taxes and has certain regulations on where they're supposed to be spending that money and what they're supposed to be doing. And that would include employees, labor, time, all that stuff. And are not Parks employees city employees? Yes. I'll help you out there.
Yes, I mean they're run through that HR, but there's I think that falls into some of the questions we've had.
They are city employees. Okay. Here's the issue. The issue is the relationship between a department of the city and a freestanding community center. This has nothing to do with the concept of a community center, yay, nay. Has nothing to do with the people on that board, their thought processes and everything they agree to and think about and the benefits they have when they're looking at the community center. Likewise, has nothing to do with parks over here and trails or anything else. It has to do with the relationship of a city department with a 501c3 and what is or isn't acceptable business practices. That's why a lot of this stuff started up in the first place. Actually, it started with the grant and everything, and whether you agree or disagree, and whether it's my opinion only or not my opinion, but starting with the grant and the way the questions that arose from it and how all of a sudden it gets shifted over, then the next thing you know, we have a greenhouse popping up and this is going on, and then you have the trails come in, and so all of it now is blended together into one big hell of a mess in a public opinion.
Right.
And everybody's dividing up. Some people are thinking city council's gone completely nuts, don't want Walton money, or they don't want the trails, which is absolutely wrong. People are trying to say, well, we're anti-community center. No, I'm not anti-community center at all. But if you want to have a community center and you want to have a 501c3, then do it the right way. Earn the money, take care of it, and do it yourself. But all of a sudden, don't start blending over and start looking at city resources, city employees, city access, city time, and everything else to start funneling and supporting projects that you've got going on for a privately funded and ran community center. It would be like taking parks and sending them to the mayor's house to paint it.
No, that's a big jump, David. That's a big jump. Come on.
No, that's not a big jump.
Yes, it is.
It is not a big jump. It is very much an example. You don't do those things. There's certain things you don't do. And that's the question that's going on now. Is this community center greenhouse overstepping? And I guess we're going to find out the legal opinion of that pretty soon. The intent is, I totally got the intent behind it. The intent behind it was an overwhelming passion on the parts of the commission and the people to develop the trails and do everything possible to improve things going on. This was not some devious, undermining thing that was going on. At least I hope maybe it wasn't. For sure, because I think it's born from a very strong desire to promote everything. When you started with the community center and wanted it to be a trail hub, you know, that sounds great. There's nothing wrong with that concept. But then when resources start moving over into a private entity, I'm sorry, people got to say, wait a minute here, and that is our responsibility.
I don't know if I can do point of order or not, but I would like to.
Go for it,
I would just like to make one comment. You just used the word "you" as if I'm the community center, and that is inaccurate.
I know.
So that's very important to delineate.
There is a delineation.
And here's the secondary part is public-private partnerships. So we don't enter into any public-private partnerships? Because to me, that's what this is.
I think as you reach out of the scope of the responsibility that has been outlined for the Parks Department and exceed it, yes, there is a line. And you need to stay within the parks and the Leatherwood and everything. When you go out and get private partnerships and everything, again, that is moving resources and allocation, I think it should be very carefully handled. Very carefully, and I think this one is under scrutiny right now for that very reason. And yes, absolutely, I'll go back to this thing again. I support you, and I support everything you've done to this point. But I do believe in the Parks Commission, the leadership that was provided by the chairperson is questionable.
I'll just pass this one out real quick. I think this has a statement
that. I could use my house painted. But David made mention that we'll be getting it sounded like a legal opinion on the ability for this partnership to occur. Did I understand that correctly?
I think there's an opinion coming, yes, and it's
from municipal league.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, I thought that was discussed, and I think that's critical before we go any further with this. I believe. I like the idea. It sounds, everything he said made good sense to me. I don't want to do anything that's wrong, or that would be indifference to the law. I don't want to do that, but it all sounds good.
Mr. Thomas?
I'd just like to say that public-private partnership most often refers to a business over here and a public entity over here, not when the business owner is the chairman of the entity. That's not public-private the way it's supposed to be. So I
If
don't
that
think
chairman owned that company, I'd take that argument a little more, but I'll leave that. You all have firm opinions and whatever on that.
Right.
So, again, I think public-private is pretty commonplace and encouraged. And
I do too.
To my
but
mind,
not when the boards are mixed. That's not public-private.
Ms. Schneider?
I am thoroughly confused on this whole discussion. Doesn't the parks do the plants for all of our city gardens?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
$7,000 or $8,000 a year.
Okay, and our community center, which keyword being community center, is going to be having a greenhouse. They have agreed to let parks participate in the use of that greenhouse, and with previous research done, Parks is going to be planting plants for our gardens that they don't have to spend extravagantly for, because they can get itty-bitty little guys for next to nothing, as opposed to already grown, ready to plant ones for a lot. They're going to grow stuff that they can sell and make money. They're going to be part of people learning how to do these things, like me with the black thumbs. To me, I don't care if it's a community center that y'all have a problem with for whatever reason. All of this is benefiting the city. It is saving money and or making money. What is the problem? That's it.
And providing programming.
I've had my run-ins with the director of parks numerous occasions. We have not seen eye to eye. All of us know how difficult it is to get people to volunteer for the commissions that we have, and the person that is the head of director of parks, or not, you're the director, he's the chairman. You know, you can say what you want, but he's a very dedicated volunteer to the city. Has been for many, many years. And he's not in this, he doesn't make a dime off anything. You know, he's just like the rest of us, and is willing to put in the time. So, you know, I've got to say that about that. And like I say, I don't agree with all the decisions he makes either, and we have butted heads. But, you know, for the man's service, I'm very, very appreciative. And so, you know, I don't think that it's a conflict of interest for him, because he's not making any money out of this. He's, you know, it's nothing. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr.
Earlier I stated that I felt that this totally came out of an overwhelming passion for parks. Whether I agree with the chairperson or I disagree with the chairperson, the motivation has always been overwhelming support, desire to promote parks. I've got that. But this council was given an issue that they're trying to work through, and that was the relationship between a municipal part of the government and a private entity. And we're still in that process right now. And that is under review. And likewise, this council also passed a motion that very clearly said that I stated that the city was suspending all engagement with the Eureka Springs Community Center until such time as the community center provided us with their articles of incorporation, their contract with the way that was laid out with the community center, and also a review of their financial records, because anytime you're engaging or looking at a private entity, I think there's a good amount of due diligence that needs to be done so that the city's totally protected. The same thing would apply to this greenhouse issue. It's nice to hear Justin stand up there and talk about all this, but you know what? The devil's in the detail. It's really going to be in the agreement. And I think that's going to be the important thing to see, is what agreement is being worked out between the parks in the city and the community center again, to see if there is any diversion or overlapping use of city resources. And other than that, I think I've said it a couple times, so I'm stopping.
Ms. Schneider.
Okay, that decision was made the night that I left in an absolute disgusted rage over the whole situation. Everything I got past that night has been turned over except for this one thing. I'd like to know who it is that is in direct contact with the foundation, with the Community Center Foundation, in regards to getting this information. Has anybody been appointed?
What is your question?
My
Exactly.
question is, who is it that is in direct touch with the Community Center Foundation to get the information? David just said that we can't have anything to do with them until they show us this stuff. Who's taking care of that?
I think that was a statement that was given to the Community Foundation, and I'm not sure.
So nobody has followed up, nobody has gone face-to-face with them and said, give us this stuff so we can deal with you or not. In other words, it's in limbo.
I have mentioned that to the Community Foundation and have not received anything.
You have mentioned. Has anybody gone to them, our city attorney or the mayor or whomever gets appointed, has anybody gone to them and said, give us this information now so we can continue to deal with our community? Or is it in limbo and will never get done, and this will always be the excuse for us never have anything to do with our center?
There's two questions. One is we've got a question that we were given to the Municipal League about some legalities. I don't think I was directed, or if I was, I did not hear it, that I was supposed to ask the Community Center Foundation for that information.
Well, then maybe
now, I may be
should
totally
do that.
mistaken on that. Mr. Mitchell, you're the one who made the...
We made the motion. The council passed the motion. It was very clearly, if the people on the community center wanted to do business with the city, they could have supplied the information and made arrangements. It's a two-way street. Obviously, the ball is in their court right now, and at this point in time, that very motion is also part of this issue with the greenhouse and has some potential impact in it. So if the community center wants to move forward with the greenhouse, and Justin is, I suppose if they don't want to provide that information, who knows at this point. But you know, the ball's in their court. Give it to us, and we'll take a look at that motion. But as far as the greenhouse, there is the ability, if we get this contract, I wouldn't have any problem with making a very clear, distinct separation or an exception for the greenhouse. But I personally, at this point, would never do that in advance of seeing this memorandum of agreement.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, sir.
One thing in the perceived conflict of interest, just procedurally, how I've been progressing with this is, if I have community center business, so to speak, is I speak with Diane Murphy, their chairman. I don't speak to Bill, I speak to their chairperson. The greenhouse matter, there's a committee. I mean, Bill is on that committee, but you know, Jack, as he mentioned, is the chair of that committee. So we're in those communications. Just as a little fact, so everybody can know how we, you know, that's, to my mind, at least a step in separating that and keeping that in a different vein. And that's how we have, in any communications have been going forward, is through myself and Diane.
Now, further that, let me also explain, I mentioned this the last time, I think, Mr. Mitchell, that my understanding of your motion had to do with us using that space as an office and meeting space, not as any other thing. Now, since then, you've tried to clarify that, so I understand what you're saying. But I have not, and again, as you mentioned, I felt like it was up to the community center to provide us with that information. I have not asked them for that. I don't have a hesitation to ask them for it.
Please do.
But I think also what we're dealing with in regards to what Mickey's talking about was the the greenhouse, and I think the last motion we had when we were talking about this was to come up with a memorandum of understanding and a contract between the parks and the community foundation on this greenhouse. And that's what we were looking for.
And we could handle that with an exception to the motion, but I have no desire to retract my motion in any way, shape, or form.
Not asking you to. I know your motion the last time was regarding, and we gave Justin this time so we can come up and find out where we were with the memorandum of understanding. And from what I'm seeing, it's still almost getting to that point.
We're hoping to have them come to our commission meeting next week, hopefully with a document for prior to that for review and then discussion at the...
And the process that I would see after they looked at it, then we would be able to give it to our city attorney for his review, and then we could give it to the council for the council's final approval and review.
Okay.
I mean, that's the process that I'm seeing.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Fine with me.
Yes, sir.
I just would like to add, when you say that you're on the committee, the greenhouse committee, and you don't ever talk to anybody except Diane, you're on the greenhouse committee representing parks.
Yes.
Mr. Featherstone is on the greenhouse committee representing the foundation.
As a committee member, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that people knew that you didn't mention that he was on that committee also.
I thought I did. I apologize if I did.
It's on there.
So, Mr. Featherstone is on the Greenhouse Committee representing the foundation?
As a member of the foundation itself, yeah.
From the notes that was given to us, Diane Murphy, Gina Eldewine, and Bill Featherstone represents the Eureka Springs Community Center. Ms. Schneider?
Justin Huss is representing the growers and educators, not Parks.
Parks is a grower.
No, Parks is a commission. This says growers and educators.
I didn't produce that document.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that's what it says. That makes a difference.
All right.
Again, it's a single member, not a chair.
Well, my understanding was you are there as a person, not as a parks director. You're there as a person.
I'm there more as a parks director.
Okay, from reading this.
That water or any, I believe, I mean, the intent.
All right, this is something that
we're going to the intent was to partner and work something out.
Okay, well, that's the thing. Reading this, my understanding was that you were there as a person.
Again, I didn't produce that, so I can't say.
Okay.
But I see my role as the potential partnership as parks as my role on that committee.
Okay.
I have no, I'm not dancing around that.
And that's a good role. Mr. McClung, you have something?
They're volunteers. I mean, they're part of this deal because they volunteer their time. That's it.
All right.
That's it.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, shall we move on to our next item, which is item the new...
hot plate.
Beg pardon?
No, quick. I was talking to Justin. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's Parks Grant to Council.
No. Number 6.
That got deferred.
No, it didn't.
Number 6.
Number 5 did.
Your number.
I thought I had deferred. Somebody put. Okay, I'm sorry. All right. Motion to discuss discussion North Main Mill Hollow parking lot.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Green.
Okay. The reason I brought this up is we have had a huge, on some of our weekends already, a huge parking problem. One weekend, they were parking all the way up to Tad's. They were parking past the train station. We have a parking lot right off of Mill Hollow that now has become a campground. I was there today. There were 3 campers there with barbecue pits out. I can pass this down. That obviously were there. There's probably 20 to maybe even 25 parking spots if they were, it was graded some, they were marked, and some signage was put up.
Well, in order to get it graded, it has to be paved.
Oh, they can't, we can't have
We
just...
can't, you can't put,
We
you
can't
can't
have-
mark on gravel.
Oh, okay.
If I would have known about these campers, I could have taken care of it, or if you had talked to the building inspector.
Okay.
We have talked about this before.
Yes, I know... She's got an idea.
Yeah. Point of clarification, is this the parking lot behind the artist colony?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, so I don't...
And we've had issues with that, and I wasn't aware of because when I went up it last week, I didn't see any campers.
Oh, there was 3 this morning. Now, last week when I first went, it was during the day and I didn't see. I went about 7 this morning.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that, but I mean, that's
The
something
one
we can
camper
take care of.
was there. There was one camper that was there. Well, my thing is, a solution would be to utilize this parking lot. There's, like I said, there's probably, what I could see today, parallel parking on one end and then diagonal on another, probably 25 spaces.
I can have Dwayne look into it and see. I don't even know whether, I can look into it and see.
Okay, because I mean some signage.
I mean, we need, basically,
At a time.
that includes you. I will go ahead and have Dwayne look into it and see what we can get taken care of.
There's no
on
need
that.
to be rude.
I wasn't being rude.
It's very difficult working on the recording when more than one person is speaking at a time.
Yes, ma'am, I understand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I will take care of it with Dwayne, if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, that would be fine. I just,
All right.
it was a solution.
Relating to that, if that parking lot can be utilized for that, perhaps a sign on Main would be directing them to that parking lot would be useful.
The issue's been, and you're absolutely correct, if we do that, we do need to have, put the signage up there, and that's no problem. We can do that. So we can go ahead and look, I can have Dwayne look into that.
I
Mr.
know
Mitchell?
that there's some erosion through part of that parking lot.
Yeah, it's dirt.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mitchell?
You know, I'm going to wait and add some to the other agenda because this topic is specific to the parking on North Main and Mill Hollow, and I don't want to go off into something else on parking when it's
Okay.
not an agenda topic, so I'll hold.
All right, any further comments? All right, next item is the new, with the parks grants to the council.
Yeah.
Motion to discuss?
Motion to discuss.
Second.
All right.
There was an article in the Eureka Springs Independent dated March 28th wherein Mr. Featherstone was quoted as stating that grant that was originally intended for the trail for Harmon Park to Clear Spring School, that it had been, quote, it has been handed off to council and has nothing to do with parks now. So my question is, are we just going to drop this grant and not do anything with it? Or is it possible that the city could possibly make use of it? We have I mean, all along Highway 62 and 23, and there are no sidewalks most of those places. And it's not just at the at the community center, but you know, a lot of these areas our students are walking along the side of a highway with no sidewalk. So it seems to me, I just hate to see a grant go by the wayside. And if Parks doesn't want it, can we take advantage of it?
Can I say that article?
Yes.
All along, the grant was to be included with our highway sidewalk grant that we had to try to finish the sidewalk from Planter Hill toward the community center. We're still seeing where we are with the engineers and seeing what the balance of that grant is. So we're still hoping we can combine the two.
I mean, there's also, I personally see a lot of need in other areas as well, along 62 where you walk between 62 and a gulch. There are at least a couple of areas. One is right by the Quality Inn, for example, and I think there's another one not too far down, closer to downtown, on the other side of the road where it just drops off into a gulch. And both of those places, it seems, would be naturals for...
In order to use these grants, most of the time you have to have an engineers and have to have engineers do the grant, do the design, and so it's most economical for us if we can continue the highway portion, because that engineering, most of that has been done.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
The last sentence here says that Featherstone stated the Transportation Department asked for council to specify what it intends to do with the funds. What does that mean, they've asked council?
I have not heard anything about that. So what you're reading is what you're reading in the newspaper.
Right.
Well, may I make a motion that the mayor look into the possible use by council?
You don't need to make a motion. I'll be glad to do that.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I'll report back. Sure. Okay.
28, March 20. I'm sorry, don't.
All right. Item 8, report on Dr. Beard's office. Get a motion to discuss?
Motion to discuss.
Second.
Dr. Beard has moved out. We have, our city attorney has been a little sick lately and a little backed up on some items. I had given him a letter asking him to send a letter to Dr. Beard regarding the rent and back rent. I think he's still in the process of doing that, if I'm not mistaken. The place is vacant, and I have talked to the hospital commission, and they are interested in renting it, of course, but I haven't gotten any of the paperwork started on it yet either. Again, waiting for Mr. Weaver to come up with a contract. Yes.
Is the space vacant, or did he leave anything behind?
I haven't been over there, so I've got to go over and see. As far as I know, it is vacant, but I've got to go in and see on that. I haven't been. I've had some other issues, and I've slipped my mind on that one. So. Yes, sir.
It's great. It's very fascinating that because Barbara Dix told me that no way, but she's only one person on a commission, so she shouldn't have spoke for the commission. That the commission wanted it, so to hear the commission is interested in renting it.
No, not the commission, the hospital. I'm sorry, not the hospital commission, the hospital.
I want to clarify that. And then the second part of that would be I would not want us to enter any negotiations with North Street until such time as we have more of a firm commitment resolution to the odd.
Okay.
Because I don't think we should take options off the table until we're going down a path.
I understand. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I think it's important to determine whether the city will have to expend any money in removing any personal property and or cleaning up the property in relationship to the city attorney contacting Dr. Beard, because there may be damages the city may have suffered.
Anything else? All right. Brings us to agenda setting. Mr. Mitchell.
I'd like to add parking as a topic on the next agenda, a little bit broader discussion.
Second.
Parking in particular, or?
Parking within the city to alleviate congestion.
I'll second.
I'd like to follow up on the grant, sidewalk grant.
I'll second.
Anything else?
Oh.
Yes.
I would like to add a discussion, and I think that was an excellent idea somebody brought up about plastic bags and new concepts that are happening in various, just plastic bags in relation to concepts that other cities that are going greener have put into effect.
I'll second.
Okay. Anything else?
Are we going to discuss our field trip out to the trails?
I'll get Kim to get everybody together and get the time set up. All right, City Council comments. Mr. Mitchell, glad to have you back.
Glad to be back. I loved my trip, and even though I got sick and ended up in ICU, I still loved it, and I would go back in a heartbeat. But other than that, I was going to talk about some other stuff, and for brevity of time, no, I have nothing further to say.
Okay. I'm glad Mr. Mitchell's back, and that's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Ms. Schneider.
Hey, I gave up my speaking last time so you could get to that meeting. Y'all are in for it tonight. No. Just like to put some info out there since we are getting into the election season. When someone runs for city council, you don't do it for the name, for the position, for the power, in EUREKA for the money, right. You do it because you care. And you care about the people, you care about your town, you care about every phase. That is why you want to be on council. Going along with being on council means research. You do your research. You go to these extra meetings. You go to events. You do everything that your community has possible. Mostly you research. You don't just come to a meeting and just play it by ear. You come prepared. You do your research, whether it's talking to a person, going to a meeting, getting online, whatever. That is probably the #1 biggest part of being a council person. That's something to keep in mind. Be prepared. Be concise. Get the information out to the people. But because you have research, you've made notes, like tonight, the whole parks thing could have been done with question and answers, as in, I've looked up this, how do you respond? Or please tell me about whatever. You have to be totally prepared and know who's going to be coming and know how and when to talk to them. Don't play it by ear. Be prepared. If you are not willing to put in a lot of hours in between council meetings, don't run. I'm done.
Mr. Thomas?
No, I have no comment.
Ms. Kendrick?
Yes, I'd like to respond to that because that was clearly directed towards me.
No.
And I do a lot of research in between meetings. I think it was very important that I got a lot of the information that I asked for tonight out to the people, so that you did make a point that that we want to get information out to the people. And I don't think that this project has been, well, first of all, Parks does have an obligation to report to City Council, which it hasn't been doing. And then I think it's very important that people have a clear view of what this project is, because when people have been talking to me about the project, they had no idea that part of the project was on private land, and I didn't know what was going to happen to that land until tonight. So that, I do my homework, but I also think it's very important that the public know the information about this project.
Mr. McClung?
I love this town. It's great.
What a rebut.
I'm just tickled to death to be here. That's all.
We're tickled to death you're here, too. All right. We hurried up the meeting last time so I could go over to the meeting that was being held over in Berryville regarding the $18 additional fee that's being charged to us for our for the closing down of the landfill in Marion County. I think if you've been reading the newspapers, hopefully you've seen that this is a very complicated issue. It started back in 2005, and I think there's a lot of fingers to be pointed at, and most of them are within the legislature and the government, state government, and the fact that they have allowed solid waste companies and other, and I'm not sure how many other organizations, to assess these type of fees for services, even if they haven't been provided all the way. It's upsetting that Carroll County and Eureka Springs was belonging to that organization, but they left, I think, within 2 months after the formation of the solid waste district, because of what they call tipping fees, which is basically the fees that are charged by trash trucks picking up the trash, and then they pay a fee to dump the solid waste. It seemed like all the counties were paying for, except for Baxter County or Marion County, where the landfill was located. But one thing led to another, and they ended up going bankrupt. They got a bond issue, and then they went bankrupt, and the courts have held that the citizens, property owners of the 6 districts are liable for that bond payment, and that's where the $18 comes up for. The meeting, I'm glad to see that Senator King started the meeting Monday night, and there was probably the largest crowd there, maybe 200 to 300. The next day, Representative Ballinger, and along with some other state representatives, continued on the meeting with a lot less crowd. And then the third day, the agent for the bankruptcy court, the trustee, was there, and basically they all gave the same information, and basically came down to a lot of lack of control by ADEQ, a lack of, or part of the legislature allowing this to continue. So I'm not sure. I understand now that the Quorum Court is going to be issuing a resolution expressing their disapproval. And I'm not sure. I think they're on their agenda. It said possible non-payment of this fee. They're meeting on the 3rd Monday of the month, which is the 16th of April. So I think that's the start. I'm sure there's going to be, I thought there might be a class action lawsuit that might be started, but come to find out that's not even possible, because it's got to do with bankruptcy, and I think, and I'm not a lawyer, but I understand that's not possible. But there may be some other lawsuits that are talking about that will probably end up being. But I would encourage more than anything else that the citizens contact the state representatives, Senator King and Representative Bob Ballinger, who's our representative and senator, and any other senators or representatives that they know in the state of Arkansas, and express their disapproval and concern over this. They're the ones who have the authority to make the changes in the legislation that can change this. I'm not sure what's going to happen. It's going to end up being in court, I'm sure. It's unfortunate, and I don't think anybody's happy with it. None of us who are involved, and we've tried to fight it as far as the Northwest Arkansas Regional Planning District. But again, the bankruptcy court in Little Rock ruled in favor of the bondholders and said this is going to be paid, period. And the trustee came up with the formula of every property owner, or every piece of property, I think is basically what it is going to be assessed $18 for so many years, 25 years, I think.
30.
And then 30, and then it gets reduced. So, anyway, that's the long and short of it. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than what I just said, and there's been a lot published in the newspapers, and as somebody mentioned too, I think there's some other websites available too for other people. So, anyway. But I would encourage people to go ahead and call the quorum court members or show up on Monday 3rd to express their support with the quorum court and their resolution.
5 p.m. for the meeting.
5 p.m. Okay. As far as things going on, seasons looks like it's officially begun. It always starts off with our USO conference, beginning the 13th through the 15th, into the Ozarks, all day, evening, and throughout the universe. So come one, come all. On the 14th, they're going to have the second Saturday gallery stroll, 6 to 9 downtown galleries will be part of that. One of my favorite things that have happened. And is this a Tuesday, the 18th? Wednesday. Wednesday from 11:30 to 1 p.m. at the Basin Park, the Cassville, Missouri Jazz Band is going to come down and be playing. If you get a chance, stop by the Basin Park and listen to them. These kids are outstanding, and it's just a great jazz group. They did it spontaneously last year. And I bet maybe the 20 or 30 people were just walking by heard them. But they loved it. The kids loved it, and they are so good. So if you get a chance, 11:30 in the morning to 1 o'clock, grab a sandwich, go down there and have lunch. It's just a great musical event. On the 18th through the 22nd, we're going to have the second annual Spring Fling Bike Rally, which is all day and evening down at the Cat House and at various venues around town. On the 19th, we have the Poet Luck in the Park from 6 to 8:30 in the Basin Park. 19th through the 21st, we'll have the 42nd annual Springtime in the Ozarks, which is an all day and evening. The events are going to be going on here at the auditorium and at the end of the Ozarks. During that same weekend, we got Carving the Ozarks, which will be at the Victorian Inn. It's an all-day affair. And then on the 21st, we will have Music in the Park with Luke Winslow King playing from 5 to 7. And then on the 22nd, we'll have Friends with Benefits event at noon down in the parking lot next to Chelsea's at Center and Mountain Street. And then on the 22nd is Earth Day information from 9 to 5 in the Basin Park. That's it. If I can get a motion to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Thank you.